Welcome back to another Auction Chapter podcast. Ricky Briggs is my name. I'm the Auction Chapter Chair for the Real Estate Institute in New South Wales and a board member. And today I'm joined by the illustrious Emmanuel Comino, a Chapter Chairperson as well, or Chapter Committee member rather, and of course the McGrath Estate Agents Auction Manager. Manny, great to have you on board. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
We are going to chat about bidding strategy on auction day. So this is, hints and tips and tricks that buyers can deploy in order to hopefully walk away with the keys at the end of an auction. What would you say would be some of the best tips that you could depart on us today?
It's interesting, and it's a very common question that we get is, what's the best type of bidding strategy to employ? And there are lots of different theories around it. For me personally, I think that in the lead up to an auction, most buyers have a similar number in mind. There might be different categories of buyers as to where they're happy to bid up to, but typically speaking, your 2 or 3 strongest or most competitive buyers on a particular property will have a very similar number in mind. That being said, obviously, the best strategy is to have the most amount of money. The second best strategy, in my opinion, is to present yourself as if you do. I think psychology plays a really big part in the bidding process at an auction. So, some things that I always like to say, and I do this when I'm bidding on behalf of friends, families, clients. I will do my best to always make sure that I'm the one that has the bid. So if somebody else places a bid, I'm bidding straight over the top of it, bidding with confidence and showing and giving off the body language to portray the fact that, I really want this and I will not be beaten under any circumstances. I think that does 2 things, aside from assert yourself as a dominant figure at the auction. It also can be somewhat deflating to the other bidders. So put simply, if I've got the bid, yes, I know that nobody else does. And that can be quite a deflating process to go through.
So, mate, why don't we talk about, Matty, you mentioned a moment ago about, dress for success, so to speak. Are you saying that the better that you dress as a bidder, that you've got more chances, or are you saying the overall picture, with your bidding strategy? What was that about?
I am not the best dressed person in the world, so far be it from me to criticise someone's fashion. I think it's the overall portrayal of the image of confidence, and the non-verbal cues that I think often go underestimated and undervalued in terms of how much of an important part they play. So where you stand in the auction, if I was bidding, I would be standing front and center, right in front of the auctioneer, so that the auctioneer could see me and I could see them, and so that all the buyers could see me. I wouldn't be looking around. I would be dressed, reasonably well. You don't have to wear a 3-piece suit. But dressed reasonably well, standing there with confidence, nice strong back, chest up, and making eye contact with the auctioneer. The other thing that I would encourage buyers to do is to open the bidding. And now, statistically, we know that 70% of the time, the opening bidder will become the eventual purchaser.
Isn't that just a huge figure?
It's impossible to ignore. So I think you give yourself the absolute best chance by starting the auction. There's no question about that. Now, again, in saying that, if there is someone at the auction who, has the capacity to pay more and the willingness to pay more, it doesn't matter what strategy you employ. But when it comes down to it, as I said earlier, I think that the majority of the time, most people have similar limits and similar budgets in mind. And so if you're able to portray to your competition that you will not be beaten and that you have limitless money, then they are more likely to become deflated and give up, so to speak, before they reach their natural capacity. So I think, that's an important thing to consider.
So really what you're telling the crowd through your bidding strategy by bidding hard and fast is that you're there to buy that thing no matter what, and you just want them to drop out so that you can come through and hold those keys at the end.
Absolutely. I think the other thing the other bit of advice that I often impart on people that are bidding on property is to set their limit, their upper limit, at a number that does not end on a 0 or a 5, because you tend to find that that's what most people do. For example, $1.5 million is a nice even number. If you add an extra 7,000 to your upper limit, which most people at that level could afford, so often we see property bought and sold just a few bids over a round number. And, in my opinion, that is because most people will set similar limits. So if you've already had those discussions with yourself, your accountant, your partner, whoever it is that's going to be in this with you, then when it comes time to spend those extra $1,000, you already know what your upper limit is. As an auctioneer, when I see a couple turn to each other for the first time during an auction, I instantly know that they are discussing spending more money than they had previously planned. And so as an auctioneer, we hone in on that. So if you've already had those discussions, there is no need for you to speak to the person next to you. You can simply engage with the auctioneer, portray confidence. And again, it all goes back to the things that I was talking about earlier.
So, mate, one last question for you. You talked about before, a little bit about bidding strategy. What's something that a buyer can do to, not interrupt the auction process, but to gain themselves ahead in the momentum of the auction? What are some of the things that they can do to be able to really stamp their authority to both not only the auctioneer, but also the crowd around them?
It's a really good question without giving too much away, because I don't want to make my life difficult. But look, momentum is an auctioneer's best friend. So as a buyer, if you're able to disrupt that momentum, you instantly place yourself at a slight advantage. You can do that by disrupting the frequency with which you bid. You might bid really strong on one and then pause for a moment and give people time. But there are risks associated with that. I'm more inclined to place bids much faster than my competition and disrupt the momentum that way. You can also change your increments. A really good strategy that I saw not long ago was that this buyer was clearly placing double whatever the previous increment was. So, for example, the previous buyer or the underbidder had spent 10,000. They would then go and bid 20,000. They hit 30, they bid 60. And that really does psychologically play in the mind, because, we anticipate most auctions move in pretty comfortable increments of 10s, 20s, 50s, or $100,000 increments. Now, if you don't play to those rules, then you don't process those increments as naturally, because they're not as familiar as you would a $10,000 or a $20,000 increment. So if your increments are different and the frequency with which they come is different, that can very much disrupt the auction, not only from the mindset of the other buyers, but also from the auctioneer. Because it is a challenge, and it's part of the art form that forms what is the auction process. We need to be really on our game, and that's a really good way of throwing us.
Well, it absolutely is. Giving a $7,000 or a $13,000 bid, or certainly an odd number. I have seen an auctioneer a day or two, where they've sort of not been able to pick up where the numbers are because of an interesting bidding strategy. So, Matty, thank you so much. Just to recap, so we've got bid up, bid strong, 70%, a huge number there of buyers that start the auction are ones that often finish it, and then obviously utilize a strategy that can sort of interrupt that momentum, that places you in the box seat towards the end. Have I recapped that perfectly on the nail there?
Perfectly.
Fantastic, folks. Emmanuel Comino from McGrath Estate Agents and the auction chapter committee member there as well. Thanks, Manny. Look forward to joining you on the next video.
Thanks, Ricky.